Hi, this is Simon Hacking from Harewood Travel, here today to talk to you about trips to Japan. I've got Charlie Orr with me, who's a Japanese specialist. We're going to go through a structure just looking at how you should analyze putting a holiday together for there. Talk a little bit about the background of Japan now and why it's a bucket list situation. We'll talk about the cities that we think are important on what we call the classic tour. We'll do a video later about the places that are off the beaten track if you want to go somewhere that's a bit quieter, a little bit different. We'll then talk about the type of style of tour to take. And finally, we'll talk about the good times to go. So if we just start there and talk about the background to Japan becoming a bucket list place to visit now and get into that.
I'd say over the last 20 years, and it's sort of been building in people's kind of minds and imaginations of becoming an accessible destination. I mean, this all really stemmed back about 20 years ago when Japan was starting to export a lot of its cultural products. So what we were finding in the
Yeah.
West, in places like the UK and even America as well, is that ramen bars were popping up everywhere. Sushi
Yeah.
was becoming readily available in the high street. And everybody, pretty much everybody, was reading Memoirs of a Geisha, and Pokemon
Go.
was slowly taking over the world, one child at a time, which has only increased. Now, fast forward 20 years later to today, you're seeing this huge interest in Japan, and you're also coupling it with these huge events. So over the last few years, Japan's hosted the Rugby World Cup, and it's also had the Olympics and numerous shows as well. Things like Race Across the World are just showing how accessible and how easy it is to travel around this destination. Now it's kind of created, well, a perfect storm. So everybody is able to go. And after COVID, so Japan was one of the last destinations to open up. It is increasing dramatically in terms of visitor numbers year on year on year. So it is a destination where everybody and their grannies seems to be heading to, or potentially have just come back from.
I think people see it as an interesting place to go to, but a very safe place. And yet there's no bins. Contemplate. And yet
No,
their pride in their identities is really great. And I think that in itself brings an interest in what their culture and what their sort of mentality is, isn't it?
100%. And I think the thing that always kind of strikes people the most as soon as they've landed into Tokyo and they're sort of like going out into the city is the cleanliness of the streets. The fact that you can't see
Yeah.
like chewing gum stuck to the pavement and there's no rubbish anywhere. It's an incredibly clean society. And that's largely due with it's essentially sort of putting a huge emphasis on the whole rather than the individual. So you'll see that people, like you say, do take their rubbish home. There aren't bins around, but people are very conscious if they go out for like a picnic or they've got any rubbish as they're traveling around, they'll take it home with them and then they'll sort it in the correct recycling bins and process it well. I'd say that more often than not, if I'm out on the streets and I've bought something and I need to throw something away, I will find a
Yeah.
public bin. I won't take it home with me in the UK, but in Japan, I'll absolutely do that. I'll be carrying around an empty plastic bottle for 6 hours before I find a place to put it. But that's the thing to do, really.
I think, again, talking about, say, particularly with a Western Europe sort of hat on, it's a very homogenous society, isn't it, Japan? Not that many foreigners there. So the entity that's created is essentially created by one people.
Completely. It is quite unique in that fact. I think it's still something like 95, 96% of residents in Japan are national Japanese. And you'll
Yeah.
see this in the writing style, the Chinese calligraphy, which has become kind of one of their alphabets. You'll see this in the religions, like Buddhism is an imported religion. And you even see this in baseball as well. Baseball is incredibly popular in Japan, but it's a very Japanese thing. Of course, the rules remain the same, but the spectacle is incredibly Japanese when you go.
But just to talk about a thing from my past in the fashion world, I know they embrace very much the Western brands and things like that. And another interest for me is cars. And the real sports cars they buy, even though they drive on the right hand side like we do, sorry, steering wheel on the right hand side like we do in the UK, they would buy a Porsche left hand drive because it's more authentic. And I don't think there's any other country in the world that would do something like that. And Ferrari, they buy it left-hand drive, and it would be perceived as being a more interesting, more authentic kind of thing. So I think they have a very interesting view on authenticity and provenance and story. So, like you say, in terms of embracing ideals, but it's still part of that homogenous culture. Fantastic. I think that's
100%.
an interesting bit of background for people, because to understand a bit about the Japanese mentality and partly what you expect to see is it is in lots of ways quite foreign to what we're used to, and in that sense, much more interesting because there's a lot more to explore and enjoy because it's quite different, which is part of the point, isn't it?
Completely. And I'd say at the core of all of this, whether we're talking about cars or kind of imported concepts or anything like this, at the core of all of it is a respect for quality. And this is
Yes.
certainly something that you can experience traveling around for yourselves.
Yes.
and you'll see in all shapes and sizes, is this kind of this journey to achieve perfection in all of its many facets.
Well, again, just talking about the tour we went on last year, one of the things that I know bowled most of the people over on the tour was we went to many various places. We went to some very nice, very expensive places, and went to some cheaper places, and everybody had those absolutely fantastic toilets. And I don't mean just that in the sense of wow, what an amazing toilet. I mean the cleanliness, the fact that all the toilets worked. Because again, talking about the UK, the toilets are not always a thing that we something to be proud of, and they're very proud of that cleanliness and that attention to detail in those amazing toilets, which of course everybody swears to buy as soon as they get home because it's such a great experience. And who knew going to the toilet was a great experience?
I mean, yeah, until you go to Japan, it
Yeah,
changes your opinion quite dramatically.
it does.
Yeah, it's I never really had culture shock when I used to live in Japan because I was based in Japan for about 3 years. But I did have reverse culture shock over two things. One was the trains just not being on time anymore. They're always depart to the minute in Japan, and the second one was the toilets. It
Yeah, it's
feels
such a
like you've
thing,
gone
and it's
back
hard
about
to
a
explain
hundred
to people,
years.
isn't it? Yeah, it's
It
hard to
really
explain it
is.
to
Yeah,
people. When you come here, you're going to be bowled over, maybe a little strong, but really impressed. Because again, it's one of
yeah.
those things where they set a certain standard, and that's just a great thing in society, isn't it?
100%. And it's a standard that's very hard to compete with, I would say. And it makes it a very unique destination out of all of Asia and potentially worldwide as
Yeah.
well. It does make it very unique in its stance.
And I think that's the point. There are lots of unique things to explore that you'll say wow to. There's lots of different things, and not just in the big cities, in lots of different places, because like lots of places around the world, there's obviously big differences between different places, which have arisen through cultural differences that have happened over time. So let's talk a little bit about the cities. If we're talking about like the classic tour, as we say, and maybe
Absolutely.
start with Tokyo and what we'd see there and that kind of thing.
Well, Tokyo is the perfect place to start. So, for many people traveling to Japan, whether it's their first time, second time, 10th time, 20th time, they will be starting and finishing in the current capital of Japan, Tokyo. I say current because it's only really been the capital for 130 years, but since that time, it's already expanded to about 5 or 6 times the size of London. So, you can just imagine its size.
Yes.
Now, one big misconception is that Tokyo is one big city. And while that's technically true, it's more like a collection of hundreds of towns and villages all squished together in a small space. So every single region of Tokyo has its own characters, has its own reasons for kind of visiting and charms as well, depending on who's going. So I think a huge bit of like huge recommendation for me in terms of spending your first few days in Tokyo is arriving in a spot called Asakusa. So that's one of the districts in
So
Tokyo.
you'd
Now,
suggest,
Asakusa is
because there's so many areas, you'd suggest breaking it down into just a few areas the first time you go to make it manageable and enjoyable?
absolutely, there's no way that you can do all of it in one go. And that's physically impossible. Even if you've been living there for decades, you're still going to find something new. It's like tackling any large city. You're just not going to do it all. So going in with a game plan and targeting the things that you want to get out of the city. That's always a good rule of thumb. Like your interest in Japan, whatever it might be food, it might be culture, it might be cars. Work that out and then target those areas. But Asakusa, regardless, is going to be your best bet to start with, simply because it's a much quieter part of the city, relatively speaking, but it's still incredibly accessible to get to all around everywhere that you might need to go. So, and also it's the variety of hotels that you can find there. So you'll find excellent choices from 3-star all the way up to 5-star luxury, and lots of places within walking distance as well in terms of attractions. So, although we'll talk about transport at a later date, you won't need to brave the Tokyo subway straight away. If you don't want to, you can still wander around and go and see Asa Shrine, or you could check out the Sky Tree. It's all very, very accessible there. And for those with dietary requirements, there's lots of different restaurant options there as well. So it's a great place to kind of base yourselves. You don't feel too overwhelmed and you're ready to kind of use it as a launching pad to explore Tokyo at large.
Well, Tokyo, I mean, it's worth mentioning that if you talk to any of the sort of top chefs in the world, they say that Tokyo is the best city in the world for top quality eating. And it's interesting you say there's like a choice of places there that you can go to because maybe Japanese food initially isn't for everybody. So if there's that choice, I think that does make it a bit more interesting, doesn't it?
100%. I mean, so Japan isn't all sushi and noodles. There are a wide variety of things. So no matter what your dietary requirements are, or even if you're quite a picky eater as well, there are going to be things that are going to cater to you. So of course, if you do like the more sort of the cultural sushi or sashimi, then
Yeah,
they've got
yeah,
that in spades. But if you just fancy having a burger and having some chips. Highly recommend Shogun Burger. I'm not a paid sponsor, unfortunately, yet, but Shogun Burger is fantastic for anybody that doesn't want to jump straight into the cultural cuisines straight on
Yes.
day one.
And you said there's another area you'd suggest in Tokyo. Where would that be?
So the other area that I'd like to suggest is we'll actually cover that a little bit later because a really good trip to Japan is going to be a round circular trip. So you kind of do a bit of a figure of eight, ending in Tokyo on your last
Okay, so you
night.
come back
So
to it.
we'll check back into Tokyo after the next destination, and we'll talk about the other
Okay.
other area.
So next we'd suggest, is it Hakone?
That's right. Yeah. So it's just outside of Tokyo. And so you need to take the bullet train and then limited expresses to get to Hakone. But it's not necessarily one place. It's actually a collection of three small villages, all connected by a bus route. But what Hakone is very well known for is its ryokan. So this is a traditional inn where you can stay, and it would be sleeping on tatami mats and futons, having traditional foods like kaiseki, and of course the onsen, so the hot spring baths. So that's where you would go to
Right,
soak. So in
right.
Japan, if you were Japanese, you wouldn't necessarily go to a beach resort to relax and unwind. You would
Yeah.
go to a ryokan, and this is where you would
Okay.
chill out in the mountains.
Just a question, how far is that from Tokyo then? What's it? It's a train ride, right?
I'd say to get there is probably about a couple of hours. So if you're sort of departing in the morning on one of your days, then you'll still have the majority of that day in Hakone. So you can easily extend it to like having a full day there, maybe spending a couple of nights in the mountains, relaxing and rewinding. I mean, it's always a good idea to put a kind of ryokan stay this early on, just because the journey to get to Japan
Yeah,
isn't short. It does take about
yeah,
14 hours direct from London. And then your first 3 days in Tokyo, you will be on your feet a lot because there's just so much to see and take in.
yeah,
So it's a good
yeah.
time to kind of pause a bit, relax, and then get ready for the next city in your journey.
Okay, so we spend a couple of days probably in Hakone, then we go to Kyoto, you think?
Then I reckon Kyoto is next on the cards. Yeah. So Kyoto is many of your listeners will have heard of Kyoto. So it's the
Yes,
old capital. So it's the
yes.
it's the cultural heart, I would say, of Japan. Incredibly well known for its temples and its shrines. The thing with Kyoto is, and unfortunately, it does continue to suffer from over tourism over the last 15 years with the rise in popularity.
How does that manifest itself in terms of over tourism? Because people hear that, but what does that mean? How would you experience it?
Well, it would be the very sort of the top places in Kyoto to visit, according to Google or ChatGPT, are going to be the places that everybody goes to, those top five places. Now, the city has so many attractions and things worth your time. It's not that fall outside of those quote unquote top five. So, I mean, a huge piece of advice with Kyoto is going with a game plan and also being open to seeing things that aren't necessarily in the top five, but still offer plenty of magic and curiosity without the crowds.
Right, right.
So a really good example of this, I would say, is if you kind of do a quick Google on about top five things, then chances are you might come across Fushimi Inari, which is the 10,000 red gates, all kind of going up a hill. Nijo Castle is another popular one. And of course, the Golden Pavilion as well. All of these they're always going to be busy, during off season. They are the places that everybody wants to go to. But when I was there last, which was luckily only a few weeks ago, we were taken to, there was something called the Daruma shrine. Now, Daruma was the Indian monk that brought Buddhism to Japan.
Right. Yeah.
He's now kind of immortalized as this kind of grumpy red shaped doll figure type thing. So you'll see actually a lot of Daruma dolls all across Japan, but this particular temple had thousands of these dolls spread all across the complex. It was a beautiful complex, and it was completely empty, despite it being very popular in Kyoto at the time. Nobody knew about it. Nobody knew that it was there. So there's still little pockets of tranquility in the city outside of these quote unquote top five. So again, kind of like Tokyo, going in with a game plan, understanding what you want to get out of that city and then making it happen rather than just simply ticking off the boxes of the things that you think you should be seeing rather than things that you must see.
Okay. I mean, I guess for most people, Tokyo and Kyoto are the main places, but I mean, there's a couple of other places suggested there. I mean, next one being Osaka. What would you say characterizes Osaka? Why would people go there?
I would say Osaka's one of my favorite cities in the world. It was the largest, closest city to where I used to live because I used to live in quite a rural destination in Japan, but
Yeah.
was able to go to Osaka for the weekend. Now, Osaka's informally called Japan's kitchen. So you can already get a bit of a hint about why people go for the food scene, particularly the street food in Osaka. But also I'd say it's the character of the city itself. So if your clients have already come to Tokyo and they've experienced Tokyo, then they'll sort of see a way of kind of carrying yourself in Tokyo. Now, Tokyo itself has a financial background. So everybody is relatively prim and proper in terms of dress. So everyone does up their top buttons and, straight lines, etc. Osaka has more of a merchant background. So I'd say there's more of a kind of eclectic style. So slightly more sort of off the wall, slightly more bohemian. And then when you're in the kind of main strip of Osaka, then there's this kind of festival kind of atmosphere. The bright lights, the kind of the music, the kind of the buzz of the city is very different from Tokyo in its way of presenting
It
itself.
sounds
So
like, yeah, yeah,
although you might be sort of forgiven in thinking that Tokyo and Kyoto look quite similar on paper, if you see some pictures, on the street level, vastly different. So definitely worth time spending kind
yeah.
of in Tokyo and Kyoto and Osaka both.
Okay. And then to Hiroshima. Obviously, people know about the, I guess, the memorial to the bomb. But what else would they go to
That's
Hiroshima for?
That's right. So the Peace Park with the A bomb dome. So finding out more about its very recent tragic past is, of course, another side to Japan. That's completely worth your time just to kind of find out a bit more about their history. For anybody that has kind of apprehensions about going to the Peace Park, it is a kind of a really kind of strangely beautiful experience. There's no blame involved. It's actually just a cry for peace. It's just a big sort of cry for peace, and they're not laying blame at anyone's feet, but it's a remarkable experience. But on top of that, after the rebuild of Hiroshima, it has become a very cosmopolitan city with incredible food scenes as well. There's a particular dish called okonomiyaki, which is very famous in Hiroshima. That's wonderful to try. And just kind of enjoy this very sort of modern cosmopolitan city now.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd say that every single town and village and city in Japan has their own character and reasons for going. Something that I'd always recommend for anybody's trip is to kind of travel, of course, at your own pace, but make sure that you're seeing as much as you can within those limitations. It's not a waste of time to spend 2 weeks in Tokyo. However, you are missing a trick, like, because the real value and beauty of Japan is its variety of everything,
Yeah.
and seeing the
Yeah.
difference in terms of like how people act and different food scenes and reasons that places are popular is so worth kind of getting out of just one place and seeing as much as you can. So Hiroshima is definitely a good example of that. And another reason for going is that many people will use it as a base to go and explore the island of Miyajima, which is just off the coast of Hiroshima. Now, Miyajima is well known for its floating red gate, this kind of torii gate, kind of appearing out of the water, which you can do just in a day trip is absolutely fine from Hiroshima. You get the train down to the coast and then you take a quick ferry over and you're there in no time at all. And that's a
Okay.
remarkable island with incredible shrine. But it's the red gate that people want to go and see.
Okay. And did you say finally Kanazawa before we head back to Tokyo?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just in terms of kind of timings and routings and things, I would actually suggest going from Kyoto directly to Hiroshima. And then when you're kind of doubling back to Tokyo, stopping off in Osaka along the way, just to kind of break the journey up a
Yeah.
little bit more evenly. But
Yeah.
then from Osaka, heading north into the mountains, so the Japanese Alps, to Kanazawa. Now, Kanazawa is very well known for its gardens, particularly Kenrokuen, which is one of the top gardens in Japan. And depending on who you're asking, as a result of it being one of the top gardens in Japan, it's one of the top gardens in the world. It is
Right. Okay.
remarkably beautiful. It's stunning. It's really expansive and it's incredibly well manicured in a very Japanese way. So going to see the gardens there is I would say unmissable. It's a great experience, honestly.
Okay. Okay. That sounds fantastic. And then we're going back to Tokyo to Shinjuku.
That's right. Yeah, either Shinjuku or Shibuya, but Shinjuku would be my recommendation. So I said at the beginning about going to Asakusa, the kind of the quieter part of the city to kind of base yourself for the first few days. Shinjuku is the opposite. At Shinjuku, you're going out, if it's your last night or your last few nights in Tokyo, you're going out all guns blazing. This is where the energy of the city is. These are going to be the bright lights, the neon, the people, the crossing in Shibuya, not too far away from Shinjuku. This is the heart of the city. This is where it's absolutely throbbing and it's electric. It's such a great place to spend your final few nights because what you'll have experienced as you're traveling around Japan, you might have certain apprehensions about traveling. You might worry about the language or the food or whatever,
Yep.
but Japan unlocks itself for so many travelers within the first day or two. So by the time you actually make it back to Tokyo and you're trying out Shinjuku, there's a good chance, Japan experts yourselves, and you will be ready for Shinjuku at that point.
So just to reflect back on, if we're taking that trip, so Tokyo, Kyoto, Hiroshima, then Osaka, then Kanazawa back to Tokyo. What would be your suggested, suggested number of days per place as a
That's a really good question. It really, of course, depends on how much time you have in Japan. But if we're looking
yeah,
at, let's say, a 2 week window,
yeah,
which is a good amount of time to kind of experience out, like as much as you can, with it being still enjoyable. I think anything less than that, you might feel a bit rushed. But if we're working on 2 weeks, I would say potentially 3 nights on arriving into Tokyo. So you give like 2 full days to explore the city. I'd always recommend having a private guide on your first day, just to kind of bring the city to life in your way. So, like, no matter what your interests, that's always a great place to start. So 2 nights, 3 nights in Tokyo, and then moving on to Hakone, I would say 2 nights is a really good amount of time and allowing you 1 full day. There's still lots to see and do around Hakone. There's like Ashi, so you can actually ride a pirate ship up there if you're so inclined. There's the open air sculpture park. There's lots to see and do, honestly, around that area, and it's a stunning landscape. So instead of having 2 nights, 1 full day there, perfect. Moving on to Kyoto, again similar to Tokyo, I would go with 3 nights in Kyoto, allowing you 2 full days. Again, private guide on the first day, worth their weight in gold to really make sure that you're avoiding those choke points and seeing something unique. Then moving on to Hiroshima, probably again, we're looking at 2 nights as well. I would try and limit any 1 night days unless you're sort of in a
yeah.
rush, just because
You're just going to
otherwise
feel
it
like you're
feels
traveling
like
all the
you are
time,
sort
aren't you?
of, yeah, the pacing
Yeah.
just is a bit off. But I would say 2 nights in Hiroshima with a full day to maybe explore Miyajima if you wanted to, and you could check out the Peace Park on the first day you arrive. So that works out really well. Then doubling back, this is probably the exception to the rule I just mentioned in terms of Osaka, but you can use Osaka to kind of break up your journey to get to Kanazawa. So you could easily do just 1 night or maybe 2 nights if you have extra time in Osaka, try all the amazing food there, go on a street food tour when you arrive, and then head up to Kanazawa the next day and then do 2 nights in Kanazawa and then potentially a final night in Tokyo to kind of round it all off. And that sort of brings us to the 2 weeks. Now, thinking about this kind of 2 week itinerary as well, just so that you're not traveling around with a lot of gear. People generally tend to travel light in Japan when they're going on the bullet trains. So luggage forwarding is a remarkable service. So thinking about
We
that
have
route
that,
I
yeah.
just went through, it works so well,
So
honestly.
you give your case to someone else and you go off and do what you're doing during the day and they get the thing to your next hotel, don't they?
I'd say the hotel after. So if we're thinking about sort of Tokyo, Hakone, Kyoto, on your final day in Tokyo, you would forward your luggage to Kyoto, and then you would take your overnight bag to Hakone. So you
Yes.
would sort of
Yeah.
just have like a backpack or just to carry on, take that to Hakone and then travel back to Kyoto, over to Kyoto. And then your bags will be waiting for you. So you can restock there and you can keep on
And
leapfrogging your luggage.
it's not very expensive, I don't think. So it's quite a nice option, isn't it?
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's not something that can be booked in advance, but it is readily available in every single hotel accommodation that you'll be staying in. I believe it
I know we saw it.
costs
Yeah.
for about a 24 kilogram suitcase for an overnight service. Costs about 3,000 yen, something like that, which is about £15, £20. It's really effective.
A lot easier than carrying it around, isn't it?
I mean, I paid 3 times that much not to have to carry my bag, but yeah, no, it's the way to do
But
it.
that's
Honestly, it's the
huge,
only way
Charlie.
to do it. I'm quite lazy when
So
it
just
comes
in
to
terms of
carrying my
um,
stuff.
style of tour, because obviously some people are going to go, hopefully people will watch this and say, some people say, I want to go guided, and some people say, I want to go solo. What's your feeling about those things, Charlie?
That again really depends on the individual, though. Like those listening will know who you are essentially in terms of the style of travel that you like. Do you love to have kind of all of your arrangements kind of bespoke and tailor made for you? In which case, going kind of like by yourself or with your loved ones or your friends is the way to go. So you can basically choose every single component in your trips, from the accommodations, the restaurants that you're going to visit, the destinations, how long you spend in each one. It's very much kind of with you in mind. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're by yourself, of course. Like guides can be readily booked. And so you can make sure that you've kind of got those touch points. So you've always got that support. But with small group tours, then you will have a guide kind of with you throughout every step of the way. And I would say for these ones, they're perfect at kind of maximizing your experience. Make sure that every single minute in Japan is incredibly well spent. The only piece of advice on top of this that I would give is if you're thinking about a small group tour, I mean, for example, if you're a solo traveler, these are perfect because it feels like you're being part of their community. But if you're thinking about a small group tour, I would advise looking for the tours that are smaller rather than larger.
And what do
So
you
if
mean
you go
by
with
that?
the
6 people,
well,
10 people, or
I would say sort of looking at sort of an average size of 12, 13, 14, something along those
right,
lines are really well
right.
suited. Because if you've got anything more than that, then there's a risk that you might need to take coaches to get from point A to point B. If you're sort of facilitating a
Yes.
group of 30, you do need to take coaches. And that means that, well, you don't get to ride public transport. And that might not sound like a big deal, but it means you can't ride the bullet train. And that's an experience in itself.
But I think you miss other experiences as well because just even, like you say, going on the underground, just walking around on the streets, although it's tiring, it can be a tiring trip because you can do most of it by walking or by taking the train or the underground rather than
Exactly.
buses. I think you experience the culture or the feeling of the place much more, don't you?
It's so much more immersive. It is so much more immersive. I think anything that involves a coach. I mean, if your listeners are from the UK, then they'll know that we're all creatures of habit here. If I'm on a coach for 2 weeks and I sit down, then the chair that I'm sitting on will be my chair for those 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
I'll be sitting in the
And I'm
same
going to
chair.
if I'm on my own, I'm going to put something on the seat next to me because there's no one sitting there, right?
No one's sitting next to
No
me. I'm
chance.
not going to talk to
No,
anybody.
no,
So
that's
you've
my
got this
seat as
kind of,
well.
yeah, you've already set up this barrier to enjoy to your own enjoyment. It's ridiculous. So you do sort of suffer from that. But there's also the restaurants as well. So in Japan, the smaller the restaurant, the more specialized it is. You won't find too many restaurants that kind of cater to lots of different foods. You'll find places that specialize in ramen or sushi or okonomiyaki or whatever. And the smaller the place, the more kind of dedicated to it. There's kind of like a master behind the counter that's putting this all together. If you're with 30 people, you're not going there.
I'm going to
You're
have it.
going
Yeah.
to you're going to a larger canteen.
So just to summarize, you can do the ideal you'd suggest would be to do it in smaller groups, which can be up to sort of 12 people, something like that. And
I
that
would,
can
yeah,
encapsulate people traveling together, people traveling in a small group, and it can also encapsulate singles as well. I know that I booked a holiday for people to go to Japan. They went in a small group and really enjoyed it because they had that interaction with the other people in the group and they could opt out when they wanted to. And you've also got, like you say, you've got that immersive experience where you're experiencing everything. You're walking amongst it. You're on the train. You're on the tube. You're with the people. You're not on a bus that kind of separates you from things. So I think that's really great advice there. So just the next thing would be if someone's thinking about traveling there, what would your suggestions be in terms of times to travel? What times of the year would you suggest to go, Charlie?
so Japan does have peak seasons. I would say that it is an all year round destination. So if you're kind of stuck to certain dates, you will find that you'll have a great time regardless. But there will be certain times that are going to be busier and weather-wise are going to be slightly nicer than others. So the time that everybody wants to go is to go and see the cherry blossoms. So the peak time is going to be the spring. So that's the last week in March, first week of April. So it is only a 2-week window to see the cherry blossoms.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's going to be the kind of the busiest time. But weather-wise, it's cool, it's crisp, it's sunny. It's a great time of year and comfortable time of year to travel. But be prepared to pay a bit of a premium traveling that time. And
Certainly the
also
flights I know are more expensive, aren't they?
the flights are more expensive, the accommodation's more expensive, everything sort of racks up in price. And also the availability is always a challenge. So if you're desperate to go during the peak spring, plan in advance and try and sort of aim for about 11, 12 months before you go. So if you're thinking about going, yeah, then start planning the year before,
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The second peak is going to be the autumn. Now, this is a slightly longer window. This is to see the autumn colors, the autumn fall, the fall colors. And this is going to be more towards the end of October and then all through November. So you've got about a 5-week window for this. Now, this won't be as busy as spring, but it will still be very popular and busy comparatively to the summer and the winter, which we'll talk about in a sec. But that's actually my favorite of the two peaks, just because, again, weather's incredible. It's a perfect time of year to explore. And you've also got that longer period of time to see the autumn colors as opposed to the cherry blossoms, where it's so focused on those 2 weeks. So it's a bit more variety and a bit more
I know when
flexibility.
we went out in the October time, and I was surprised because I had to buy some shorts while I was out there, but it was shorts most of the time, and that was something like the 20th of October onwards. So it was still the weather was still very clement, very nice, and as you say, the colours are really beautiful. So I would say that's a great time to visit. I've
It's
also been
fun.
out in December before, which was okay. But what about summer? What about high summer? Because of course it will be a little bit cheaper then. But
Summer will be a little bit cheaper. It is the rainy season, so that does put a lot of people off, and it does get very hot and humid as well. So we're looking at sort of probably mid 30s in terms of temperature with quite high humidity, and that does put a lot of people off, unfortunately. But
yeah, Yeah.
If you're comfortable in these kinds of weather conditions, if you've traveled around Southeast Asia, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
more often than not like this, and you're kind
Yes.
of used to that style of travel, then it does unlock a lot of things. So in Japan, during the summer months, it's the time of festivals. So if you want to have a really authentic experience and go to a festival while you're in Japan, you can only go in the summer. So you could like wear yukata, which is kind of like a light kimono that they wear for festivals.
Yes.
You can also go and see amazing firework displays and try kind of street food. It does unlock itself a lot during the summer months, but again, be aware of the heat and humidity. But as long as you're aware of that, it's a great time of
Okay,
year.
that's
It's my
fantastic.
favorite time of year.
I think we've covered a lot of ground there. I think for the classic tour, it sounds like just like in 2 weeks you can cover quite a lot of those places, and you can see quite a lot of things. Doesn't mean say you see everything, of course, but Japan I think is one of those countries where you'd probably suggest to go back because you can explore again in more depth some of the places you go, but some of the other places which we will talk about in a where we talk about the places that are not, if you like, on the beaten track. So
Exactly.
we'll come back to that another time. So it sounds like 2 weeks is about the right sort of time, I think, Charlie. The classic times to go, spring and autumn are still very good, but it's certainly worth considering the summer, particularly as you're saying there, because of the festivals and things, and the winter because there's still quite a bit to see. There's going to be less people, so it's going to be
Yeah.
easier to see things. And
Well, I would
in
also say
terms
on
of
winter as well that if anybody really wants to get the most amazing photographs of Mount Fuji, then
yes,
the winter is going to be your best bet because it's a notoriously shy mountain. So during the summer months, it does kind of hide itself behind a thin veil. So even if you're quite close to it, you can't always kind of see it full scope. But in the winter, you get the clearest views of the mountain. So any sort of photographers that might be listening that are looking to take a picture of Fuji-san, that's the time to go.
and what you've got to remember is obviously when you go on the bullet train down to Kyoto, you sit on the right-hand side and all they do is they turn the chair around on the way back. So you just book the same seat on the way back, but it becomes the left-hand side of the train. So that's a fabulous thing that I'm not sure anywhere else in the world has that, but it's
No,
just
it's
a
kind of
great thing
wild when you
because you're
see it.
like, no, I need to sit on the other side, surely. But in fact, it's the same side because they just turn the seats around. Brilliant. Charlie, that's been fantastic. I'd just like to say thanks very much indeed for that. I think we covered a lot of ground there. And if just to say to anybody watching, if you're interested in a trip to Japan, please DM me and we can have a further conversation about some things that we could offer. Thanks once again, Charlie.
Thank you very much.